Jared is the place to go for diamond fashion jewelry this holiday. Jared the Galleria of Jewelry has an incredibly unique selection of diamond fashion designs in necklaces, earrings, and bracelets, including our jewelry brands, Neil Lane Designs and Heart's Desire. Or indulge your craving with Levion chocolate diamonds. Prices starting at $100 to over $10,000. Find a Jared store or shop anytime at jared.com.
Your eyes are the windows to the soul. Did you know they're also the windows to your health? Because they let eye doctors see what's going on inside. Think about this. A comprehensive eye exam can be an early detector of serious health problems, like diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure. Shouldn't you see your eye doctor yearly? Go to thinkaboutyoureyes.com to learn more and find a local eye doctor. And you just might save more than your vision. Brought to you by the American Optometric Association.
I hear the train. I hear the train.
Good afternoon and welcome to Justice for All, and I'm George Yates, and for the next couple of hours we're going to be here with our weekly talk show, interview show here on 1650 K-Talk Radio, WHKT here in Portsmouth. And, today is really a great day because, I drove my car here to the studio and burned some gasoline up. And I would imagine that many people that listen to the show here today are also in their cars or will soon be in their car later on in the day. And, every day in the news, we hear there's oil in the news, whether it's fracking, whether it's an advertisement from the American Petroleum Institute, whether it's a political news about whether or not the Keystone Pipeline is going to be approved or whether Obama is going to approve of that. We have issues about global warming that's in the newspaper every day, and a lot of that is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. And so it is the cutting edge issue of the day. And we have a giant of the environmental tort law bar here as our guest today. His name is Stuart Smith. He's from New Orleans. And he is a lawyer that for almost 3 decades has been taking on big oil and winning. And so he's quite a David versus Goliath giant killer and a fascinating fellow. And he's with us today. And he's the author of Crude Justice, which is his recent book. It's out and available for sale. And so we're plugging his book here for him today. How you doing, Stuart?
I'm doing great. Good afternoon.
And you are in a country club in New Orleans, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Well, I would guess after you won a $200 million verdict, actually $1 billion verdict against ExxonMobil, and it was reduced to $200 million, I would guess you got paid enough attorney's fees to join a country club or two, didn't you?
Yeah, we were very happy with the outcome, yes.
Well, listen, your book is called Crude Justice, and I'm really excited to have you on the show today, and I'm hoping everybody out there will stay for this interview. Listen, I guess the first, you've been taking on big oil companies as an environmental tort lawyer now for almost 3 decades. Are you still at it first? And what got you started in this line of legal practice in the first place?
Well, to answer your first question, yes, my law firm is still actively engaged, as am I, in prosecuting oil pollution cases. The Louisiana is really, considered the armpit, of the United States. We have a lot of chemical companies, petrochemical companies, plastics industries, and so we have a lot of problems with pollution. I happened to get out of law school in the mid-'80s when environmental toxic tort law was really becoming the thing, and I naturally gravitated toward that because at heart, I believe in protecting the environment, and ended up doing the case, which is the main case we talk about in the book, was the Street versus Chevron case.
Yes, tell us about the Street versus Chevron case, because that really got you started. You didn't really know the area of the law that much, but you got involved in it. You put in 18-hour days. You interviewed the experts. You spent time studying, and by the time you finished that case, you were an expert in this field.
Yeah, well, the oil and gas industry had essentially covered up the fact that part of the waste stream from oil production contained highly radioactive materials, radium-226 and radium-228, which are naturally occurring radioisotopes. The part of the oil production process, when you produce oil out of a well, the main waste product that comes up with the oil is what's called produced water, wastewater, produced fluids, and historically those produced waters and produced fluids would be simply dumped into open pits, dumped into streams, and polluted a lot of fresh drinking water aquifers in the oil-producing regions. One of the things that occurs is that as the temperature and pressure changes, as the water comes up the pipe, it's basic, chemistry. The salts and the radioisotopes will come out of solution, out of the water, and will form a crust inside of the pipe. Well, as that pipe gets crusted up, the well begins producing less oil, and so the oil company begins losing money, and they essentially contracted out the job of cleaning out this pipe that had this scale building up. It's a similar situation to what happens in your shower. You'll sometimes notice scales forming in the holes in your shower head. So my client, Winston Street, had been in the oil service business for a long time and had a machine that would clean out the inside of the pipe, and they did that for many years. And what they weren't told was that this scale contained high levels of radioactive material. And one day, the officials came and knocked on his door and said, "Can we look around your property?" And they pulled out the Geiger counter, and of course, his entire business operation was contaminated, and that's how the whole lawsuit started.
And so he had to shut down his business?
Yes, he did.
And then you sued Chevron.
We sued Chevron, Shell, and Mobil.
And what was the basis for your suit? What's your cause of action against them? That they didn't warn Street of the danger?
That was the primary tort claim, negligence claim. We also sued them for ultra-hazardous activity. The handling of, interestingly enough, the handling of radioactive material is considered to be the best example of an ultra-hazardous activity, which subjects the person doing it to absolute liability.
Now, your book is called Crude Justice, and throughout your book, you use you use a term. It's an acronym, TERM, and you call it TERM. What does TERM stand for?
TERM stands for Technologically Enhanced Radioactive Material, and you can find it in a lot of different places. But what it means is that the concentrations of the radioactive materials in the oil formations, deep down into the earth where the oil formations are naturally occurring. They're not necessarily that high, but what happens is, as a result of it, the definition of technologically enhanced radioactive material is that as a result of the process created by man, meaning technologically enhanced, it concentrates and makes the radiation more dangerous. And you find these technologically enhanced radioactive materials in the phosphate industry, for example, in the lens polishing. There's numerous industries where radioactive materials are concentrated.
What you were a young man at that time, not that you're old now, but you were just a young lawyer starting out, and you ended up with this case basically because nobody else would take it, or it was referred to you because it was such a difficult case to prosecute, and you took it on and won a verdict. Did you go to? I guess I'm asking a lot of questions here, but how was it you ended up in this case in the first place, and did you go to trial, and what was the verdict for Street? Did you actually settle it, or did you have to try it?
Okay, well, I'll do my best to answer those. Basically, the Streets, people ask me about what I do and the type of law that I do, and I kind of relate it to medicine and say, that we're like the brain surgeons of the law field. I mean, we don't do red light, green light cases, and we're not like orthopedic surgeons. This is the highest possible level of the practice of law that there is. And so the streets had been told by numerous lawyers that they hired that they could handle the case, and it turned out that they couldn't. So they had been through 3 law firms by the time they found me, and they had fired all 3 of those law firms, and they happened to call a defense lawyer that was defending a case that I had filed against Armstrong Rubber Company from pollution from a rubber tire manufacturing facility in Natchez, Mississippi, and that defense lawyer referred Winston Street to me. So that's how I ultimately ended up with the case. The case proceeded to trial in April of 1992, and it lasted for a little over 6.5 months in federal court. At that time, and I think still is, one of the longest civil jury trials in history. But Chevron ultimately decided that they had to settle the case, and we did settle the case, and that's basically how my career started in the oil and gas.
And your settlement would not allow you to talk about what the amount was.
The amounts are confidential, unfortunately.
So your background as a brain surgeon in this area, though, when you started this case, did you have the technical expertise that you needed, or did you develop it as you went along?
I developed it as I went along. I was a philosophy major in college, and so it was really, I wasn't a scientist, although I had taken advanced science courses in high school, but I was able to learn it as I went through the case.
And so you did all your studying, and then once you finished the street case, I guess you were pretty famous for that long trial. And then did your door just start getting knocked down then by other environmental pollution victims?
Yes, that the regulatory news media focus on this problem pretty much began during the street case. My lawsuit was the first in the United States like this, and once it was resolved after 6.5 months of trial, word quickly spread that we were able to handle these kind of cases, and due to the fact that these contaminants have been spread over vast areas in the oil-producing regions, landowners in particular, began hiring us to force the oil companies to clean up their property.
How in the world did you go up against that many big corporations? They've got some deep pockets. You must have just had a heck of a time hiring experts and the costs involved. Did you have some deep pockets yourself? How were you able to take on the size of these corporations with the amount of money that they have to throw lawyers and law firms and experts at you?
Well, I was working with another lawyer at the time of the street case that was older than me. He had been a very successful maritime personal injury attorney, and luckily, he did have some resources to prosecute the case. The problem in the type of business that I am in is that my boss told me this, but you eat what you kill. If you don't kill, you don't eat. So. Working on a case like this for a year and not being able to work on anything else kind of strings you out and hangs you out there. So we were, very, very lucky how it ended up being resolved.
What was it? Was there I know you talk about a Perry Mason moment in another one of your trials, but what was it that ultimately got Chevron and the other defendants to settle with you after 6.5 months of trial?
Well, the other defendants had settled before that trial. Shell had settled. There's a great story in the book about the painted spider, which basically once we had those videotapes of the painted spider, that's when Shell settled. And I can tell that story if you want, but basically, Chevron decided that they weren't going to pay, and that they knew that they had to stop us. There and in this case, because they knew that if they didn't, that the Pandora's box would be open for these type of lawsuits.
So that was they ended up settling, but by making the settlement confidential, they, I guess, limited their downside a little bit.
Right, but in other words, one of the questions you asked is why did they settle? And Basically, it was because of massive discovery abuse that Chevron committed, trying to cover up its tracks. The main issue in the case was because really we wanted a punitive damage verdict, because that makes this kind of case worthwhile. And the two main issues in the case were what did Chevron know and when did they know it about this? And the second major issue was how dangerous was the material that the clients were exposed to. And on both of those issues, Chevron, we had court orders from the court ordering them to produce the information that they had related to those two issues. And in the course of the trial, we discovered that they had, in fact, directly and intentionally violated the court orders. They had covered up test results of my client's property that showed levels that we had never seen before. So it was a massive case of discovery abuse that brought them to their knees. And
you've been trying to get the field files, I believe, was what you wanted to get the field files in this case?
Right. Basically, the oil companies would not. The oil companies generally will keep multiple sets of files. They'll keep a set of files in the oil field. They'll keep a set of files at their main offices in Houston. In this particular case, they produced the files from Houston, but they refused to produce the field files, claiming they didn't exist. And my clients, having been involved in the oil and gas industry as a service contractor for as long as they had, knew that there were these field files. And these field files contained notes by the engineers running these oil fields about different problems. And in the middle of the trial, the judge realized, and everybody realized, that they had lied about whether these files existed, and the court ordered them to produce these files. And in fact, they immediately did. And towards the end, we were found the mother lode of these files, and the court actually made an inspection. They adjourned court, and the judge went to this office that just contained a huge room full of these files that should have been produced, years ago in the middle of the trial. And the judge essentially told Chevron that that they should be prepared if he finds discovery abuse. There was going to be some serious sanctions, and that's when they settled.
If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm your host, George Yates, and we're here with Stuart Smith. He's an environmental tort lawyer from New Orleans who's been battling oil companies that have been responsible for environmental and pollution and also causing hazardous injury to humans. What kind of injuries did the streets have? And when you sue a company like this, what kind of what does this radiation do to people when they come into contact with it?
Well, radio isotopes are considered to be the most toxic substances known to man. And you may ask yourself, well, why is that? Well, because it's really pretty much the only chemical, so to speak, that doesn't have to get in or on your body to hurt you. In other words, you could be standing next to radioactive material on the ground, and it will irradiate you. The problems that this particular radioisotope causes were discovered actually in New Jersey back in the 1920s. There was a very infamous case regarding what was called the New Jersey radium dial painters. And when radium was discovered back in the early part of the 20th century, it has a phosphorescent type of the activity causes the material to be phosphorescent, and so they were making paints out of the radioactive material, and certain watch companies were painting the dials with the radioactive paint. And the young women that were hired to paint these dials would tip the brush in their mouths to sharpen, to make the point that much smaller so they could paint these dials. Well, after several years of this, they began developing terrible tumors, cancer of the paranasal sinuses, the jaw, and bone cancers throughout their bodies. And it was a very, very infamous case. So that, And so that we used that against Chevron because it was well known in the scientific community how toxic these radioactive materials are. So basically, that's the problem. It will cause cancer. There is no known safe level. What it does is the radioactive particles that are emitted from this radioactive material will interact with DNA on a cellular level and will disrupt DNA, which can result in cancer.
So what you're telling us is that every time you go drill for oil or natural gas, you're bringing up radiation from the earth.
Yeah, when you begin producing wastewater with that oil and gas, yes, you are bringing up radiation from the earth.
So this, what do we do about that, and how dangerous is that to us? Just, I mean, over the course of the last 100 years since we've been pulling oil from the ground, you talk in your book how a lot of times the defendants will come in and talk about naturally occurring radiation, and then you have to use dosing experts and all this sort of thing to try to prove to the jury that, well, no, this is not naturally occurring radiation. This is way more than that. How do you overcome these defense lawyers who say that radiation is naturally occurring?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, we live in a radioactive world. Most people don't realize this, but, you know, we are exposed to natural background levels of radiation from the sun. You know, in some parts of the United States, in the Northeast and Midwest, you know, we have radon gas that comes up from the ground and can get into people's homes. So we're all exposed to radioactive materials, you know, every day of our lives. But the fact of the matter is that these doses that people were getting from these materials in the oil field, you know, were much, much, much bigger than what you would get just from natural background radiation. And that's how we explained it to the jury, that, you know, while, you know, you get a certain amount just living, some of these doses were just, you know, very, 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 very large.
Well, you talked to about the spider web. What's the spider web story?
Well, it's a funny story, actually. That one of the things that we had to do was we wanted to inspect with a radiation detection device the oil fields where the pipe came from that were cleaned by my clients on their property, because we had to prove that, you know, this defendant sent radioactive pipe to the yard where it was cleaned out. So in Shell's case, you know, we finally got a court order and an agreement from Shell to produce their oil field that had sent pipe to the streets. And so we arrive at this oil field one morning, and with video cameras and Geiger counters in hand, and it was clean as a whistle. It was like the cleanest oil facility I'd ever seen. And, you know, we weren't finding any radioactive material in any of the pipes or anywhere around there. And the clients, the streets were going, you know, they couldn't believe it, that, you know, something's wrong. And so because it looked freshly painted and it looked all, you know, almost brand new. And so as we were sitting there videotaping the wellhead, out from behind a hidden crevice comes a spider with the paint on its back.
Okay.
And so then we knew that, in fact, they had, you know, cleaned the place up before we got there. And so we started looking around further and further away from the site to try to find the radioactive material. Ultimately, we did. What Shell had done is simply take the radioactive material that was in their facility, and they used backhoes and bulldozers and pushed it into the neighboring farmer's watermelon patch.
We're going to take a short break here. Please stay tuned. We are here with Stuart Smith. He's an environmental tort lawyer from New Orleans, a real big hitter. And his book is called Crude Justice, How I Fought Big Oil and Won, and What You Should Know About the New Environmental Attack on America. And when we come back after this break, we're going to talk with Stuart Smith about his book, about the environment, about the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, which is coming up on its 5-year anniversary here in a couple of months, and how he successfully sued ExxonMobil and got a $1 billion verdict. So we'll be right back.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Hi, this is Greg Bigoveris. Join me for Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1 right here on News Talk 1650 WHKT. You can also hear the show on TuneIn as well. We will talk to local, regional, and nationally acclaimed sports guests, and we'll interact with our audience as well at Greg Bick on Twitter. Sports Scene, Wednesdays from noon to 1 right here on 1650 AM.
All right, we're back on Justice for All. I'm George Yates. We're here with Stuart Smith, the author of Crude Justice. Before we get to some more of your exploits, I am fascinated by the fact that you've got such a varied lifestyle. Stuart, you pilot your own plane. You've got a boat that you sail all around the world. You're a certified scuba diver. You enjoy yourself after you've fought these court battles, haven't you?
Well, I would say that I've been lucky, and these successes have allowed me to live the life that I want to live.
The most fascinating story, I think. Well, I don't know. There's a story. The whole book's fascinating with the way you have taken on these oil giants and won. But I think it's pretty fascinating that you're actually piloting your own plane from Miami, headed for New Orleans on April 21st, I believe it is, of 2010, and you look and you're actually in the air observing the blow-up of the Deepwater Horizon rig from BP out off of the coast of New Orleans. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible, isn't it? I have a home in Miami and a home in New Orleans, and I was actually coming back to New Orleans for business reasons, and we were over the Gulf of Mexico while the rig was on fire before it sank, and could visually see just the intense flames coming up out of that thing. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, and just must have been spectacular. And of course, you talk a lot of your book covers the Deepwater Horizon. You had already sued ExxonMobil and received a $1 billion verdict against them. When what they had at one point, you would have settled that case for $13 million, I think.
Well, yeah.
And then you ended up getting continued, and so then you said no, we want $26 million, and they said no, and then your partner Jack talked the jury into writing down $1 billion. Actually, he asked for $3 billion, didn't he?
Yes, that we asked for $3 billion. Yes, we did.
What was it that ExxonMobil had done that made a jury want to give your clients $1 billion?
Well, it's very similar to the street case. There was a pipe yard in New Orleans, and surrounded by partially a residential neighborhood. Exxon had knowingly shipped radioactive pipe to this facility. Didn't tell anybody about it, and knew that the radioactive material was being dispersed, throughout the area through through airborne emissions from the machines. They use these machines called rattlers that were driven by high pressure compressed air to spin the end of the wand, so to speak, and it would just basically blow dust like a huge dust cloud coming out of these machines. And Exxon, even after they admitted that they had the material, very similar to Chevron, covered up the dangers of the material and failed to clean it up and failed to warn the public and the people living around it. And I think and failed to warn the workers and didn't give the workers any medical treatment. So I think that those all in combination just really, really upset the jury.
The total net worth of ExxonMobil at that time was $83 billion. So your partner threw 83 pennies out on the table and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to just take 3 of these pennies off the table here to send them a message." And the jury gave you $1 billion, so they decided 1 penny would be enough.
Right, yeah.
Now,
he basically would ask him, you take the pennies off the pile, and he would say, "Does that pile look any different?" And, of course, it didn't. And, $1 billion to a company like Exxon, it's a lot of money, but, I mean, it's like pocket change to them, really.
You're a smart guy. You know how to build a team of lawyers to go after these companies. You're smart enough to know that your expertise is in cross-examining some of the experts and your courtroom style. But then when it comes to opening statement and closing argument, you're enough of a team player that you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to hand off that job to my folksy partner, Jack. That's pretty smart stuff. And you also build a whole nother team of lawyers to help you in these cases, don't you?
Depending upon the case, yes. And Jack was the perfect person to do some of that trial because the amount of time that I had to spend preparing to cross-examine Exxon's main witness, which took 3 days, and the putting on the expert witnesses and cross-examining their experts was tremendous. And it's nice to have a team like that where you can break up the duties and lay some things off on some other people.
Right. How many lawyers ultimately did you have on that case?
We had about 5.
So did you split those $200 billion? Let's see. What are you, about a 40% contingency on that case? I'm trying to do the math to see how much Stuart Smith took home.
We did. I took home the biggest chunk. Let's put it that way.
That's okay. We don't need to know we can just kind of use our imagination. So Exxon didn't want to settle that case at all. They never got an aha moment, decided to try to get, or did you just say, no, we want to roll the dice? You've got a bit of a gambler in you.
Well, it was actually quite strange. Exxon, it was known as a very arrogant, tough defendant, the toughest and most arrogant in the world. I mean, Exxon is like if you have a room full of oil company people, Exxon's the gorilla in the room. It's the largest at that time. It was the wealthiest private corporation in the world. Exxon has been the Apple of the corporate world for generations. While Apple now today, of course, is worth more than Exxon, that's only a very recent development. So Exxon, was and is one of the richest, most powerful companies in the planet, and they just don't like to settle. We tried to settle the case in the very beginning. We asked Exxon to go to mediation and let's see if we could work something out. All my client wanted was to have his property cleaned up because they had radioactive scale all over the place, and Exxon canceled 3 mediations. Just said, well, we're not interested in doing it, and so we proceeded to trial. And Exxon, we had was known as a shadow jury, and your listeners may not know what this is, but it's a technique that trial lawyers use. And what you'll do is you'll pick a cross-section of the community to reflect the jurors themselves, same background, same sex, same economic class, and you will put them in the courtroom, and you will let them listen to the evidence that the jury's listening to, and then every night you'll ask them questions about the evidence. It's very helpful because you can ask them things like, was there anything about the testimony today that you didn't understand? And so, like, you'll get answers saying, well, I didn't understand this, and I didn't understand that. And so that the next day you could actually go and answer those questions and make sure the real jury knew what the answer was. And so it's very, very helpful. The shadow jury was, awarding us anywhere from $1 to $3 billion in punitive damages, about, I'd say, 60%, 65% of our way through the trial. And at that point, I walked up and talked to the corporate counsel and said, you're getting killed. I mean, we knew we were whipping their butts, but we didn't realize how bad at that point. And we walked up to him and said, what are you going to do about this? You're losing this case. And he said, we're not paying more than single digits.
Meaning $9 million.
Which means, $9 million. And I'm saying to myself that, I don't know who's running the ship, but they're not doing a very good job. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they had spent probably $2 million in defense costs at that point. So it was kind of gratifying when the jury came back and gave us the $1 billion. And I walked up to the lawyer and I said, well, you got your single digit now.
Yeah, really beautiful. And that's what you call the chapter, big oil and the single digit. I think I've kind of asked this question already a different way, but I'm just going to go point blank. I had a guest on my show. He's a professor from UVA. He wrote a book called Too Big to Jail, and he talks about how mainly in some of these criminal cases, how big corporations and the government will settle cases where the corporations pay a fine or do some kind of remedial action to clean up their act. And a lot of the reason is because the corporations have so much money that they can wear down the government at trial. And yet you are managed to go up against the giant corporation, ExxonMobil, and they weren't able to wear you down. How are you able to hang with them? If they've got $2 million in defense costs, you must have had some pretty deep pockets then in order to hang with them as plaintiffs' lawyers.
Well, by the time Exxon rolled around, the Exxon trial, it was a decade after the conclusion of the street case, and we had basically had a little cottage industry going. As a matter of fact, one time in about 1997, a defense lawyer came up to me in one of these cases and said, "Stuart, you're the biggest growth industry in the state of Louisiana." I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, they're spending so much money trying to get everything cleaned up before you get there. That is probably the biggest growth industry in Louisiana." And I was very proud of that, actually.
So you not only have hit them for some big numbers, but you've also changed their behavior.
Correct.
And that's got to be gratifying.
It is very gratifying.
So the judge ultimately reduced that $1 billion verdict to $200 million. What was the reason for that? He just did find that the punitives were just out of proportion to the compensatories, or tell our listeners about what punitive damages are. And well, I guess the $1 billion, was that all punitive, part compensatory, and why was it reduced to $200 billion?
Yeah, the billion. The actual verdict was $1,056,200,000, and so the $200,000 was to compensate the plaintiffs for the diminution of the property, the value of the property. The $56 million was to pay to clean the property up, and the $1 billion was in punitive damages. Now, punitive damages is a foreign concept to our civil law system in Louisiana. Most of your listeners may not know this, but 49 of the states in the United States their laws are based on English common law. Louisiana is the only state whose law is based on the Napoleonic Code, or continental Europe law. And under the continental European law, punitive damages are simply not available. But Louisiana, because of the huge amounts of toxic substances that are around us, they passed a special law allowing punitive damages in environmental cases. And so it's not something that happens very often. That's one of the reasons why this case in Louisiana was such a landmark. But the Court of Appeals said that, while yes, Exxon was reckless, and they recklessly disregarded the safety of the land and the people that worked there, that they were going to limit the punitives to 2 times the compensatory damages, which the punitive damage verdict would have would have been about, after they cut it, to $115 million, and when you added the $56 million back and you added the interest, it was a little north of $200 million.
If you just joined us, this is Justice for All, and we're here with Stuart Smith. He's an environmental tort lawyer from New Orleans, and is also a pilot and a scuba diver and a sailor. And apparently, at some point in your life, you bought a 5,000 square foot, somewhat of a mansion there in downtown New Orleans, not far from the French Quarter. You lived a pretty good life there in the Big Easy.
Yeah, we bought actually a historic home in the French Quarter. It was built in 1820, and we enjoy it there. It's New Orleans is a beautiful city, and it has its problems, but all in all, aesthetically, it's I think one of the most beautiful cities in the United States.
What are you doing now? I know that you are an activist. You're still practicing law. You've loaned your name to Loyola University. You've developed a school for them. What's your current project going forward?
Well,
among others.
We still have a lot of cases that have not been resolved in the BP litigation. We were lucky enough to have had a good enough reputation to get a good group of clients in that case. And I'm actually doing different types of toxic torts now, although I still get a lot of radiation cases, and that's really probably my single greatest expertise, because you could count the number of plaintiff radiation lawyers in the country on one hand. They just don't exist because the cases are so difficult. I know one in California and maybe one in the East. So, but I just settled a case that involved a concrete crushing facility, believe it or not. And I didn't know this, but concrete can have radioactive materials and also some very toxic heavy metals in it from the manufacturing process. My clients lived around this piece of property that they decided to turn into a concrete processing site because the interstate bridge that crossed the lake was destroyed during Hurricane Katrina, and so the federal government had to build a new bridge for Interstate 10. Once the new bridge was built, they had to take down the old bridge and dispose of it, and the plan was to take that concrete and turn it into concrete pads and put it to protect the land from erosion. Well, they forgot the people they hired, wanted to do it, make more money, and so they basically started crushing this material and it blowing all over the place. And we ended up testing the houses and got a substantial settlement. So we pretty much do any type of environmental law, and I'm still actively involved.
Tell us about the most famous of your cases is undoubtedly the BP, Deepwater Horizon. Are some of those lawsuits still pending that you're involved in?
Yeah, there are many cases that are still pending. That there was the settlement that has been in the news now for a little over. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
The settlement that has been in the news for very much the last couple of years, the settlement that BP originally agreed to and then decided that they didn't want to pay, that's been in the news. But a lot of our clients felt that the settlement was inadequate, so they opted out of the class action, and so we're proceeding with those cases individually.
Well, tell us about a lot of people don't really know. We know that there was a big oil spill, and Deepwater Horizon is the name of the big rig out there. What actually is the BP oil spill disaster all about? And I guess I'm going to say, first of all, you have this big blowout, and then you have the big cleanup, and then the lawsuits, and and then the damage to the environment. So what stands out to you when you start talking to people about the Deepwater Horizon disaster?
Well, I basically, and that's part of my book too, man has never been able to create a fail-safe engineering system. These, no matter what the promises are, good perfect examples are Fukushima in Japan. Everybody's been told over and over again that nuclear power is perfectly safe and, there's nothing to worry about. And here you go with this huge disaster over there, and then the same thing with fracking and offshore oil and gas production. And so the Deepwater Horizon is a perfect example of the fact that industry is going to say it's safe because they want to make the money, but nothing's foolproof, nothing's 100%. And so that's pretty much what I tell people, and I believe that a good example of the problem is the president's announcement. I think it was last week or the week before that the government's going to open up the eastern seaboard to offshore oil and gas drilling, and I was just shocked that they would even consider something like that when Deepwater Horizon has already polluted the Gulf of Mexico. It'll never be clean in our lifetimes, or probably our grandchildren's lifetimes, or more. The seafood is still contaminated, and so I was shocked, but that's what's happening as a result of our addiction to oil and gas.
Well, I'm sitting here right off in coastal Virginia right now, and I was shocked by it too. I think that there's a long permitting process that's going to go through, and so maybe he's just passing the buck on to the next administration that can shut it down. I don't know. But, we have a bulk of our business here in this in the Virginia Tidewater region is military and tourism. And you imagine what will happen if we have tar and oil all over our beaches. It would just kill the economy.
Well, and that's exactly what it did to the Gulf Coast. I mean, it destroyed a lot of people's livelihoods and their businesses. The problem with this situation is that what they're talking about doing is leasing these blocks of oil and gas prospects in federal waters. So the states, have very little to say about it. I was reading in the newspaper where in some of these eastern seaboard states, these Republican governors are clapping their hands and, saying, please drill, and, basically, I guess, because it will enrich their constituents who own companies that will service that industry. In Louisiana, that's a very, very huge business. It's made a lot of millionaires out of a lot of people from here simply servicing offshore oil and gas rigs. But the problem is as you said, once a disaster like this happens, that oil isn't going anywhere, and it will. They may make the beach look pretty, but you go out there with a shovel and you dig down 2 or 3 feet, and you're going to see oil.
Yeah. And now, you said that the seafood in the New Orleans, Louisiana coast is still tainted. So it's not safe to go down and eat, crawdads from the bayou?
Well, crawfish are actually a freshwater
right,
fish.
They're coming out of the river. So,
so
bad analogy.
Yeah, but they're not really. Yeah. Well, the testing that was done of the seafood that was coming out of the Gulf while the spill was ongoing and after, was basically a smell test, and so they're not really testing the seafood really anymore. And we know that it's still contaminated to some degree with hydrocarbons. And so we believe that this material, based on all of the science, is entering and will continue to enter the food chain, both in the Gulf and in the human food chain. So there's a lot of oil left on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and you talk about that in your book. The 5 million gallons, I guess, of oil came out, or thereabouts, right? And then barrels. I'm sorry, barrels. And then they went out and they basically said nobody can even go out there and look at the slicks. It was such a public relations nightmare for BP. You said that the corporation just stopped people from going out there so nobody could show everybody in America just how bad the slick was. And then they started putting this chemical on it. What's the chemical that they put on the oil in order to make it sink?
Corrects it. It's called a dispersant.
Yeah, it's a dispersant. Oh, so wouldn't it have been better just to leave that oil on the top and let the sun get to it or whatever? Or they just put this other stuff on it that you say in your book that was actually more damaging to the environment than the oil itself.
Right. Well, because what happens is when you put dispersant on the oil, it breaks it up into smaller molecules, and it makes it much more bioavailable to animals that are ingesting it. And so the problem is that, well, there's really a bunch of problems, but basically a political decision was made at the highest levels of the American government to, save BP and not, and protect BP from, going bankrupt or, paying, what they had to pay, and just, downplay the significance of what happened. And so the fish, what I always tell people is, look, fish can't sue. So the main goal of the dispersants was to keep the oil off the beaches and off of people's property, and not let it, hit the beaches where it could be cleaned up, but to basically to sink it to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. And so that's exactly what they did.
And did that help prevent it from going to the shore?
It did. And see, what they were really concerned about, and you can tell when it was predicted that the oil slick would pass through the Keys into the Atlantic Ocean and up Miami and Fort Lauderdale and in that area.
Right.
Some people were predicting that it would go as far as Virginia. I mean, BP couldn't take that hit. They could never pay those kind of damages. So what was decided was they were just going to sink it and disperse it.
So I guess in the long run, it certainly did help us. Our beaches here in Virginia and down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina are a lot cleaner now as a result of that. So that's a good thing for us.
Yeah.
But it killed a lot of turtles and dolphins and birds. And what's the toll on wildlife from that spill?
Oh, it was it's still being felt today in the populations. I mean, a lot of turtles were killed. I mean, a lot of everything that encountered the slick. I mean, the slick at one point covered half of the Gulf of Mexico on the surface.
God. And turtles can't sue either. So,
right.
Did BP ever pay for that? I mean, definitely there was lawsuits filed, and there was this $20 billion fund that they set up to, I guess, pay fishermen and folks who opted in. And you chose to represent people that opted out. But was there any compensation ever paid just to the state of Louisiana or to any of the states just for the loss of wildlife?
Well, not yet. Basically, the court has just finished the third phase of the trial, which is the penalty phase under the Clean Water Act that the federal government has filed. So the federal government has filed a very large claim to the tune of about $15 billion against BP for the damage to natural resources, including the turtles and everything else. The states have their own suits against BP pending as well, which is for damaging the natural resources of the states, and the economic damage is the loss of tax revenues and other things. So those are all still pending against BP.
If you've just joined us, we're with Stuart Smith. He's the author of Crude Justice. And your book, while I'm giving it a little plug here, Stuart, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, I suppose, anywhere where good books are sold?
Yes, it is. And it's also available at the publisher's website, which is benbella.com.
Ben Bella. Yeah, my producer really likes that company. He says there's really a progressive group of publishers, so good job picking them. Tell us about this Corexit. It's got kerosene in it. It's just an environmental disaster putting that stuff out in the ocean, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Like I said, the problem is that let's say you have an oil slick, and what they were doing is this well was spewing oil from the bottom of the ocean, and what they allowed BP to do for the first time ever in the history of the world is they allowed BP to take a robot and put it at the bottom of the ocean with a hose, just basically a big pressurized hose that sprayed the Corexit directly onto the oil as it was leaving the blown-out well. That had never been studied before. Nobody knew what was going to happen as a result of that, but the government, our government, decided to let them do it. And basically, a lot of the oil that was coming out of the well, once it mixed with that dispersant, basically just sank to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, okay. Well, we are here with Stuart Smith, is the author of Crude Justice. We're about to go to a break here in a minute, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the future of oil and renewables and what this expert on big oil and environmental pollution has to say about the future of oil in the world. So we'll be right back with Stuart Smith. This is Justice for All, and we'll be right back after news from CBS.
Europe are being tested. President Putin has to understand that as he has changed, so has our focus.
Reporter Alex Klimanoff via Skype from Kiev on what Moscow wants.
The Kremlin leadership wants Ukraine to be a destabilized country. It doesn't want Ukraine to join in with the European Union. It doesn't want Ukraine to become part of NATO. The Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has been speaking about during the Munich Security Conference. He said that Russia has been very offended by the West trying to take control over these regions in Eastern Europe and former Soviet republics, which traditionally were part of the Russian sphere of influence.
A group of Bosnian immigrants faces federal charges in this country of trying to support Islamic militants. Justice Department reporter Paula Reed.
The Department of Justice has arrested 5 individuals for providing material support to terrorists overseas. The group is charged with shipping military supplies, including boots, uniforms, and rifle scopes to an associate fighting in Syria. They also allegedly transferred money to the associate through Western Union and PayPal. The Department of Justice believes their associate was killed last year while fighting with the Islamic State.
Bombs explode in Baghdad, killing at least 40 people, just as Iraq lifts a nightly curfew that had been in place for 10 years. ISIS has claimed responsibility for one of the attacks, in which a suicide bomber detonated his explosives in a street filled with hardware stores and a restaurant. Witnesses say young people, children, and women all died there. Uproar in Israel over Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to visit the U.S. Capitol.
Israeli opposition leaders are calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to cancel his speech to a joint session of Congress after Vice President Joe Biden said he would not attend. Parliamentarian Amir Peretz accused Netanyahu of harming Israel's crucial ties with the U.S. Netanyahu says he will give the speech to warn the world of the dangers of a nuclear Iran. Robert Berger, CBS News, Jerusalem.
Very wet weather system has drenched the West Coast. Patrick Burke at the National Weather Service.
They've already seen, in some instances, up to 10 inches of rain in some of the more favored elevations. And they're going to receive more rain, especially on Sunday. Another heavy batch comes through before the storm ends.
There's another foot of snow in the forecast for New England early this week.
That's supply and demand. And so if they continue, and also these operations produce huge amounts of radioactive wastewater from the fracking operations, because the water that they take and they pump down comes back out with the oil and gas that they're producing. So they can only use it once, and after that it's got to be disposed of. One of the most famous cases was in Pennsylvania, where they were basically pulling the trucks up with the fracking wastewater and plugging into the sewage plant, which was then processing the oil waste with the sewage from the town and dumping it directly into the river. But they were not removing any of the radioactive material or the toxic substances, because the sewage plant was basically designed to neutralize the harmful bacteria.
Well, so does the water that's used in the fracking, does it become radioactive? I mean, isn't it wastewater that then has to be disposed of like any other toxic chemical?
Well, right. And the water that they're using to frack, what they'll do is, let's say you have the oil-bearing formation that you want to go and frack. Then above that, 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet, is a saltwater, non-drinkable drinking water aquifer. What they'll do, or sometimes they'll take surface water, but they'll take a source of water and they will use that to frack the formation with the oil in it. But but not only are they pushing out or recovering the oil from those formations, they're also recovering the produced water or the wastewater we talked about earlier in your program that contains high concentrations of radium-226 and radium-228, which is the radioactive materials that were in the street case. So they're producing those as well.
This fracking revolution, when did it begin?
Well, it was a Halliburton engineer that developed. I mean, they have been doing similar operations, these secondary recovery operations. For example, I did a case where they were using CO2 gas to pump into old oil fields to push out the oil. But the fracking as we know it today is a relatively recent development, I'd say within the last 5 to 10 years.
Just energy producer in the world or close to it as a result of this hydraulic whatever you call it, fracking, hydraulic cracking. But you know, you can't turn on the newspaper or read the newspaper or turn on the radio or TV without everybody glowing about low gas prices. And isn't that a good thing that we're doing this in order to get gas prices low and get the economy going?
Well, you know, it really depends on how you approach the problem and look at it. You know, one of the main reasons we're in this situation now that we're in with this global warming and the pollution that's occurring from these oil and gas operations is that we have never really paid the actual cost of the oil, of the gasoline that we're using. The damage to the environment is not included in the price you're paying for that gallon of gas. So, in fact, you know that's one of the main problems. I mean, gas should be more expensive to encourage people to use less and to encourage investors and others to invest in alternative sources, in my opinion. Otherwise, we're going to continue down this road, and we're going to affect the ability of our descendants to live on the planet.
Well, these oil companies have so much money and powerful lobbyists, and so they've got Congress bought and paid for. So that any attempt to get renewables going is going to be met with resistance from the oil industry. And there's always going to be that talk about cost. Well, solar is more expensive, but when you start figuring in the cost of the pollution, which, as you say, is not really borne by the company, but is just borne by the environment, the cost of solar and some of these other renewables would be much more competitive if you figured out the actual costs.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if you actually figured out the real cost of producing it, including the damage to the environment, it would be significantly more money.
I mean, this is what happens with so many industries. If you just dump your waste out into the river where everybody else has to pay for it, it's much cheaper. And then, of course, if the state or the federal government starts regulating the dumping of that, well, then it's going to make the cost of your goods go up. But that's part of having the person who produces it and the people that purchase it pay for it, as opposed to everybody else who aren't going to profit from it. And if they want to pay for it, well, then they should pay for the cost of producing it.
I agree 100%.
So what is the future for oil then, Stuart? Is oil going to be our main? Is oil going to be it for the foreseeable future? Are renewables going to be able to make a comeback or get a toehold in the energy matrix?
I think oil is it for the foreseeable future. I don't think there's a political will in the United States to do anything different. I think the Europeans are taking the situation with global warming a lot more serious than we are, and spending a lot more money on renewables than we are. But right now, with the prices where they are and the fact that we are able to produce so much more oil and gas than we did before, leads me to conclude that there's not going to be much change, and that we will continue to place our descendants' lives in jeopardy as a result of the damages to the environment and the resulting global climate change.
I guess we're all part of the problem because we all still use a lot of it. It's really the only game in town. I was on the phone with a friend of mine in Utah today, and he says there's 15 ski areas in the west that are about to shut down. Mammoth Mountain's got 20 inches of snow, and these ski areas they don't have any snow. There haven't been any new snow in Utah in 3 weeks, and I hear ski areas up from Washington State down to California are closing. And it's 60 degrees there in Salt Lake City today, and they're raking their yards, and spring skiing is beginning in the first week of February now out west.
Wow.
Anyway, so what about the Keystone Pipeline? You have some opinions on that, and that's in the news every day, it seems like.
Well, yeah, and I think this is a perfect example of just the hubris coming out of our politicians, especially now in the Senate. These Democrats that voted for it, expecting the president to veto it. One of the problems we have, in my mind, I've got a couple cases like this, is that after World War II, there were some laws passed called the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. And that law basically gives private industry the right to expropriate property for the building of pipelines that the FERC says is reasonable. And so what you've got now is if this Keystone goes through, you've got a foreign corporation, a Canadian corporation, that is basically going to expropriate using the force of law and take away people's property from Canada down to Beaumont, and they're gonna get a right of way for their pipeline and force these people to sell that property, and they're going to build this highly dangerous transportation system for this extremely dirty oil. The oil, if you really are interested in the open pit mining that's being used to produce this oil, just go online and look at some of the pictures. It's like a moonscape. It's extremely dirty oil. Hopefully, with the new economics and the price of oil being so low, hopefully that will give them pause and maybe hopefully kill it.
Well, because this pipeline has become such a cause celeb. I mean, it's amazing that how it's environmentalists on one side and pro-oil, and then there's other people that say, well, it's really not that much of an environmental disaster, and it's also not that big of an economic boost to the economy. It's really not as big of a deal either way as people are making it out to be. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, the main thing is what we're doing is, if this thing's approved, we're basically going to allow a Canadian corporation to expropriate a right-of-way directly from Canada to Beaumont through the heart of the United States, basically forcing people to sell their property, forcing people to accept this pipeline by rule of law to benefit a Canadian oil operator. That, to me, is the most disgraceful part of this whole thing. I mean, if they want to ship their oil to China, then let them build a pipeline to Vancouver. So why should we let them build a pipeline through our country? So we're going to force our people who don't want the pipeline to sell them property so they can build their pipeline, and then so we are now complicit in the production of this very dirty oil. That's what it really upsets me.
Why do you call this very dirty oil? What is the difference? This is you call this oil the crack cocaine of oil. If we call our addiction to oil an addiction, why is this oil so let's say dangerous to the environment more so than, let's say, other types of oil?
Well, because the traditional oil that we produce is in with oil wells. The oil is generally trapped in these formations. A lot of times near salt formations, at least in the Gulf, and so you put wells down into the pool of oil, and you pump the oil up, and you send it to the refinery. These oils are trapped in rocks and sands that are at the surface of the planet, and so what they have to do is they have to scoop it up physically and process it through a processing manufacturing facility and extract the oil from the earth, and then take that oil and put it into a pipeline. So it's extremely it takes a lot of energy to make that oil. And so, therefore, there's a lot more pollution and a lot more carbon associated with the production of that oil than traditional oil drilling and production.
And it's not going to increase. It's not going to help our economy that much, is it? I mean, because it's a Canadian company and it's going to go down to a refinery in Texas, and it's going to create some jobs for the building of the pipeline, and then it's done, right? It's not a big economic boost to the United States.
Well, it's going to be a huge economic boost to the people in Texas that are going to be processing it and putting it onto boats and shipping it to China. They're going to make a fortune. So, but yes, as far as the average folk, it's not going to help that many people out. And but that's just the way the system is set up now. I mean, these type of folks in the oil and gas industry, they've got tremendous political power and stroke, and they want to make more money.
Let me ask you a question. We're going to go to break here in just another minute. I see these ads by the API all the time on TV. What's the point behind that? Why are they advertising?
Well, I think that if you do polls, the oil and gas industry does not have a very good reputation. I mean, Americans, for the most part, have seen through, all their fancy commercials that, in fact, that their operations are dirty, and they haven't always been forthright. And I think that they're following the BP. BP has spent almost $500 million, advertising how wonderful they are and how all the oil is gone since the oil spill. So this is just a methodology of, improving their public profiles.
Right. So they don't lean on their congressmen to. So they lean on their congressmen to approve the Keystone Pipeline.
Sure.
And other things. We're going to go to break here. We're with Stuart Smith. If you just joined us, please stick around after the break. He's the author of Crude.
At dbcs.org and dbcs-kids.org.
So we're back with George Yates here, Justice for All, and Crude Justice is the name of the book, available on Amazon. And all. What's the name of the publisher?
Ben Bella.
Ben Bella. And
BenBella.
And you sort of what can the average people that are concerned about the environment now? It just seems that we're kind of powerless to do much about it. We see global warming happening. It seems to just be an inevitable thing. We can't. Oil is it for a while, as you say. It's a little scary, isn't it? I mean, what can we do to reverse this trend in this situation?
I really think that the only way is to convince the politicians to force people, and primarily the corporations, to pay what this energy really costs to produce. And at that point, these taxes, a carbon tax, some people have called it, or whatever, can be used to develop infrastructure for alternative sources. And I think that's really the only way that's going to happen.
Yeah, but we've got this Republican Congress and this huge, government's bad, deregulation is good, and that's the whole mantra, isn't it? And you can't really get around that. And if you even admit that there's global warming, which many of them still deny, that it's even happening, because once they admit that it's happening, well, then now they have to put some sort of controls on it, and they don't want to do that, so they just deny that it's even going on.
Well, I think they're slowly coming to their senses.
Right. Yeah, we're getting more and more people that are saying, yeah, you can't deny the science anymore. Well, listen, this has been a great interview. I'm going to let you go, Stuart. I know you got some interesting things to do for the rest of the day. And is there anything that you'd like to tell our listeners before we go that we haven't had a chance to cover? I know it's been over 90 minutes, and I appreciate you spending the time with us. What would you like to talk about that we haven't had a chance to discuss?
I think we've pretty much covered what I talk about in the book, and I would urge everybody that's interested in these issues to get a copy of the book. I think they'll enjoy it. It reads like a novel, but everything in there is true. It's a memoir, and the real story is about the clients and what happened to these people, and it's a cautionary tale for everyone, I think.
What before you go, what are the injuries that your clients did suffer that you were able to point to? The injuries of, let's say, the streets, and I think the folks who you sued for with ExxonMobil. What are the actual injuries, physical damage to them that they suffered?
Well, you get everything from increased risk of cancer. Radium causes disruption of bone. You get a lot of people with weakened bone pain, and then, of course, we've represented a lot of people that worked in these pipe yards that came down with leukemias and other kinds of cancers.
Right. And I had one more question. I had a really fascinating law professor from, I think, University of Michigan. Her name was Dorothea Taylor, and she wrote a book called Toxic Communities. And she talked about how so many of these environmental disaster areas were in poor rural communities, mostly, or at least largely black. And that was one question that I had. Did you find, or have you found, then during the course of your, and you don't mention that anywhere in your book, but you do mention it in one spot in there. Do you find that this is the areas that they tend to pollute are going to be the areas that are more poor and more rural and maybe more minority, so that the political power of the people to stop this kind of pollution is going to be, let's say they're not going to be putting them in the country club neighborhoods or near the golf course?
Well, I think there's no doubt that these operations generally tend to be in poor areas simply because the land's cheap and it's much cheaper to operate. And again, the people around you don't have enough political power to interfere with you. And so, yes, I think that's a reasonable thesis, and I have found that to be true.
But they've got Stuart Smith to fight for them.
Well, if they call me and they need me, we'll certainly see if we can help them.
Well, and the name of your firm is Smith
Stagg.
Smith Stagg, and you've been in with this fellow Mike Stagg for many years now, and you're Smith Stagg, and that's in New Orleans.
Yes, in New Orleans, Louisiana, smithstagg.com.
Right. Well, great. Well, listen, I'll give your book another plug after you're off the air, but I really appreciate you taking the time with me today, Stuart Smith. Thank you so much.
No problem. It was very fun. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we're going to say goodbye to Superlawyer Stuart Smith, who wrote this book, Crude Justice. It's available on Anthem. It's also available through his publisher, Ben Bella. And, go get it over at Barnes & Noble and read this book. I did read it. And it does read like a novel. It's really a memoir, somewhat of an autobiography a little bit. He tells a little bit about his childhood and the beginning of the book. And then he just goes through in his beginning of his legal career and how he gets started with his very first case with a fellow named Winston Street, who was cleaning out some pipes, and because you get all this radioactive material in the inside of these pipes, and so his first client had a business where he was cleaning out the pipes for the oil companies, and then it turned out he had no idea that they were radioactive and that he was causing all kinds of damage to him and his workers as they were cleaning out these pipes. And one day, some folks from the environmental regulation group in Louisiana showed up and said, "Wait a minute, your whole field is radioactive." The Geiger counters came out, and it was just going off the scale. And they went through two different law firms, this was back in 1986 when this event first happened, and this was the Street case that got Stuart Smith started in being an environmental tort lawyer. It's kind of fascinating because he was only 28 years old, just out of law school, and kind of just starting out. But he took on this case, and in '92 he got a large verdict from Chevron. Which was confidential verdict. But in the course of him doing that trial, he ended up learning a lot about the whole impact of this radioactive, it's called TERM. What was it called? Technologically enhanced radioactive material. And he describes himself as a brain surgeon because he says that this type of law practice is only done by a handful of lawyers, him being one of them. And it's very specialized, and he knows it, as you can tell from the interview. And I'm sure not all of you were able to listen to the entire interview, but I don't think you can find somebody anywhere in the country that's more knowledgeable about big oil and the environmental effects of oil drilling and fracking on the environment and on the people. And his book does make the point that these oil companies care more about profits than they do about people, and that they will do anything to make more money, and that will generally mean then to pass the costs of cleaning up their toxic waste on to the rest of the people and onto the environment. So here we are. But then we're part of the problem if we're going to continue to drive our automobiles and use products that are made with oil. So it's hard for us to not feel a little hypocritical to be angry with the oil companies, although, and we're all happy when the price of oil comes down to $2.15 a gallon. And it probably should be much higher if the oil companies were required to pay the overall cost of it. So, and so that's the book. And I can go ahead and recap what he has also said in the last couple of hours that we've had him on, over 90 minutes. And he talks about, he's certainly opposed to this Keystone Pipeline, which is in the news all the time. And the Keystone Pipeline is going to be built by a Canadian company, and it's going to be going across the United States. And it will be basically, they will have to, by using regulations established by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission many years ago, if it's approved, then this company will be able to come in and condemn lands that are owned by private property holders, and I guess the federal government in the United States will probably cede the land to this company, and they're going to build this pipeline. He mentions in his book, which I didn't get a chance to have him mention on the air here, but one of the reasons why that pipeline was held up for the longest time is because the state of Nebraska did not want the Keystone Pipeline to cross over the state of Nebraska, because there's a freshwater drinking supply there called the Ogallala Aquifer, and it's a very environmentally fragile aquifer, and the pipeline course is going to be going right over that. And so the concern that Stuart Smith mentions in his book, and of course the concern for many environmentalists, has been that if there is a large spill in the vicinity of that aquifer, then it would taint the water of that whole area. For more than 2 million people in that area of that aquifer drink from that water. And the price of a bottle of water, of course, is higher than the price of a gasoline right now. So think about it. What's more important, our water or gasoline? And as the Canadian tar sand folks can take that oil if they want, and they can run the pipeline across Canada west to Vancouver and refine it there, and then ship it over to China if that's in fact where they want to send the oil. We have plenty of oil here that we're making ourselves and cracking ourselves and creating our own environmental problems. So I guess I'm kind of coming down against this pipeline, but I think that I've read a lot about this, and it seems that some people will make a lot of money off the pipeline. The vast majority of people in this country will not. And I think a lot of environmentalists are also upset that it's going to encourage these Canadians to exploit these tar sands even more. You know they're going to do it, though. The Canadians are going to exploit this. It's open pit mining. And as Stuart Smith said on the air, go online and see what is going on up in Canada right now with this tar sands development. It's that very dirty oil. They're literally just destroying square miles of gorgeous, beautiful Canadian wilderness to get to this oil that's underneath the surface there to feed our addiction to oil. So that was his final. We talked about the Keystone Pipeline. The BP Deepwater Horizon disaster is still going on. It was 5 years ago, April 21st, 2010, that well blew out. And a lot of those claims are still not settled, and they're still ongoing. And the environmental disaster in the Gulf is still ongoing. And Stuart Smith maintains that the seafood there is still not safe to eat. And of more recent, those of you that have been keeping track of the news, Obama just a week or two ago approved of a long-term plan to sell leases to oil companies to drill for oil offshore here in the state of Virginia. I was shocked by that Obama was going to agree to that, but I'm sure a lot of oil company executives were happy about it, and I think a lot of people that might do services to the, clearly if you're going to be going offshore here to drill, however far out it is, there will be plenty of business for people here in the port of Norfolk and Hampton and up the bay, and from Baltimore and everywhere else to help come down and service these oil rigs offshore. So it will be. I don't think that Virginia actually these are federal oil leases. I'm not sure the state of Virginia gets anything from the leases. I think the federal government owns the land. It's out in federal water. So the economic benefit to Virginia for oil drilling off the coast is going to be the people that supply the rigs, folks that run boats in and out. Of course, the rig workers coming in for a little bit of liberty are going to be coming in, and they're going to be spending money in the cities of Norfolk and Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and Portsmouth and so on, Hampton, Newport News, and our area. So there will be people working offshore. There will also be, I'm sure, people from this area hired, engineers and other work staff to work on the oil rigs offshore. So there's going to be economic benefit from it, but the downside of it is if we have an oil spill like they had in New Orleans, that would just be a disaster for, the Gulf of Mexico does not have quite the wave action we've got here on the Atlantic coast. But, those of us that live along the Virginia coast and of course, any oil that blows out from a Virginia rig would get down on the beaches of the Outer Banks. Imagine those pristine beaches down there in Duck and Kitty Hawk and Nag's Head and Hatteras Island and Ocracoke and all those beaches that consistently rank in the really top 10 everywhere in the world for cleanliness and pristine beauty, and end up with oil slicks along our beaches. I can remember years ago being on the beaches of Santa Barbara, California, when they had there's oil rigs off the coast of California, and they've had their problems too. And you'll end up walking down the beach, and there's these little globs of tar on the beach and it's kind of nasty. So when you read Stewart's book, you talk about the numbers of turtles and dolphins. He talks about infant baby dolphins that were mainly killed by this oil spill. Hundreds of those Kemp's Ridley turtles, just hundreds of them. I mean, and almost 2,000 of these Kemp's Ridley turtles were killed, and many dolphins. And so those of us that love our dolphins off Virginia Beach. I mean, you can't go out there off the coast in Virginia Beach and not see the dolphins. So if you got an oil spill, then the baby dolphins off this coast here would be killed, and we've got plenty of turtles off our coast as well. So, and the economy of Virginia Beach would be damaged really badly if we have any kind of an oil spill off this coast. So, I think that offshore drilling is something that we need to really think long and hard about before we agree to it. It's just it's one of those real worries. And as Stuart Smith says in his book and on the air, there's never been a way to make an offshore drill rig completely safe. And he says there's an oil well right now in the Gulf of Mexico that's still leaking oil years and years after the blowout. They've been unable to cap it. And we know that there was, 5 million barrels of oil that came from the Deepwater Horizon. And they used that chemical it was called Celexa, and they used this chemical to go with mainly kerosene to make that oil spill sink and go down, and it killed a lot of fish and dolphins, but at least it spared the beaches. So that would mean that if we had an oil spill off our coast, they'd probably try to use that same dispersant to so that it wouldn't get onto the beaches, and so they might be successful in keeping the oil from coming onto the beach here, but then we would end up with the ocean being so polluted. And imagine just going out there swimming. And he's got Stuart Smith in his book Crude Justice talks about there are bodies of water in some of these areas that have been polluted by the oil companies that you can just light a match to them, and the water will just catch on fire. It's so full of pollutants. So We're going to go to a short break here. I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. We've been here for the last 90 minutes with Stuart H. Smith. He's the author of Crude Justice, How I Fought Big Oil and Won, and What You Should Know About the New Environmental Attack on America. And he is definitely arguing that we should have the actual costs of the oil and gas production borne by the producers. And that would mean us, the consumers, too. The price of gas would go up at the pump, but it would also mean that renewables and other types of energy that don't harm the environment would become more cost-effective. So it's probably a good idea to think about going forward. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with some closing remarks.
Bay Propeller is the region's best prop shop. With 25 years under his belt, Max Allen and a team of highly skilled techs provide fast, quality service on all types of boat propellers. From 8 to 80 inches, Bay Propeller utilizes MRI propeller scan technology and dynamic spin balance. Distributor for many brands, Bay Propeller ensures you get the right propeller for your needs at discounted prices, with emphasis on made-in-the-USA propellers. Bay Propeller, next to Portsmouth Trailer Supply in Chesapeake. Call 485-5681. BayPropeller.com.
When it comes to automobile service in Hampton Roads, Fink's Car Care is the destination locals have counted on for decades. Family owned and operated, they specialize in transmission service, oil changes, state inspection, radiator service, tires, alignments, and showcase Win automotive products. Fink's does it all. Military and senior discounts are available. Find them on Facebook and visit them on South Military Highway in Chesapeake and Victory Boulevard in Portsmouth, Monday through Saturday. For more, log on to finkscarcare.com and call 545-3573 today.
Denby Baptist Christian School is now enrolling students for the upcoming 2015-2016 school year. Denby Baptist Christian School offers a quality Christian education for students in kindergarten through the 12th grade and an early learning center for preschool children ages 2.5 to 4. DBCS is a ministry of Denby Baptist Church located in the Oyster Point section of Newport News, offering education marked by a biblical worldview, academic excellence, extracurricular activities, and affordability. Denby Baptist Christian School offers daily Bible classes and a weekly chapel service. Call and schedule your tour at Denby Baptist Christian School, 13010 Mitchell Point Road, Newport News. Call 757-249-2654. The mission of Denby Baptist Christian School is to educate the mind, nurture the soul, and shape the character of each student in a Christ-centered environment based on the truth of God's Word. Online at dbcs.org and dbcs-kids.org.
Okay, well, we're back with the last 10 minutes or so of Justice for All. I'm George Yates. Thank you for listening in this afternoon. We just had Stuart Smith with Crude Justice, and wow, what a big hitter he is. I mean, that guy has really hit some big verdicts, and as he said, he's probably one of the big guns. In any event, that was really a good interview I had with him. I'm really happy that he was able to come. There's a lot that we talked about today about the environment. The name of this book was How I Fought Big Oil and Won, and What You Should Know About the New Environmental Attack on America. And what I was fascinated by was the fact that he was able to take on these big oil companies and have a deep enough pocket that he could go toe-to-toe with them. He settled that one case one case that he was doing with Exxon. They'd spent over $2 million on litigation costs, and so in order to do that, fortunately he had himself a partner who had some money, and that's always the biggest problem when you're wanting to go out and sue a big company, is that they've got way more money and they can just kind of wear you down. We had that interview with Brandon Garrett, who's a law professor from UVA. I had him on late last year, and And he wrote a book called Too Big to Jail. And he says the government settles with big corporations all the time because the big corporation has sometimes more money to spend even than the government to defend one of these criminal prosecutions that might be brought against the corporation. So the government settles the case for, without really punishing the corporation too much. So it's interesting that Stuart Smith was able to take the case to trial and go 6.5 months in that street trial, his first one, before Chevron finally settled. And I don't know the exact date, length of the trial that he had with the Exxon Mobil trial, but ultimately hit them for a $1 billion verdict that was reduced to $200 million. But he's in that area of what they call environmental tort law. And, a tort is just a fancy name for a case where you're suing somebody civilly as opposed to a crime. And he became an expert in radiation and how these oil companies will actually bring up all this radiation from the ground when they're drilling for oil. The fracking thing is quite scary, and that's the one new technology that's only been around for about the last 5 years or so, since, as he said, and that's what's been the revolution in allowing us to become the largest natural gas producer in the world because of all this fracking. We're going out to old wells that all the easy oil has already been taken up from the well, and so we go back out and use this fracking, which is nothing more than taking pressurized water and other fluids and just forcing it into the ground, and it goes into these formations and it gets in, and the pressure in the fluid just forces the gas and the oil that's in the ground to come back up through the well. You couldn't have gotten it through conventional methods, and now you can get it through this hydraulic cracking. We call it fracking. The problem with it is also forces methane out of the ground, and methane is many more times a warming agent to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide is. So we're concerned about the burning of fossil fuels. So we go out and we do fracking, and we try to say, well, if we frack, we get this natural gas, and natural gas puts out less carbon dioxide than oil, so it's better for the environment, and it's true. So a lot of this fracking, they say, oh, we're getting natural gas, it's really good. We're using natural gas and not oil. But the problem with it is, in order to get the natural gas out of the ground, it produces a lot of methane that goes up into the air. And in the long run, our efforts to get the natural gas out of the ground causes more global warming than the fact that natural gas burns less carbon dioxide than oil gets us in gains. So it's a net loss, actually, from the amount of and some of the jury is still out on that, to use an old phrase. But the methane that comes out is very very warming. And I don't know if you heard my comment earlier today, but it is very warm out west. I see that there's a lot of rain. I heard in the news at the top of the hour on our CBS affiliate that there's a lot of rain on the West Coast, and you don't hear a lot of there's snow is on the East Coast. There's about a foot of snow up in New England, but out west the ski areas are closing down. Mammoth Mountain has a total of 40 inches of snow at the top. 40 inches for Mammoth Mountain. Now, those of you that have been out west and done some skiing in your time know that those high Sierras get so much snow, and of course in the mountains of Washington State, up in the Cascade Mountains, they get 200. They'll get so much snow that it's just you drive along down the road and there's giant walls of snow on both sides of the road. Well, it's not happening anymore, and they're closing down ski areas out west. So this global warming thing is really happening. And in our area, it's going to be a little scary too, because the water levels are going to be rising. And so I guess we're all just going to have to get ready for it, because it seems to be kind of irreversible, this global warming thing. We're going to try to, if we move out of it, but it seems that it's just happening, and there's really very little that we can do other than to try to convince our politicians to move into renewables. And as Stuart Smith said in his book and on the air today, convince your politician that to pass on the real costs of oil and gas to the producers, and of course then on to the consumers. And we're not going to like it because the price goes up. But if the price goes up for oil and gas, then the price for solar and wind and some of these other renewables will be more acceptable to the rest of the public. And America has fallen behind. Germany is a model for, if you're interested in renewables and how countries are doing it, Germany has 4 times the solar use percentage-wise in their energy grid than we have. So we need to start going in that direction more, and hopefully we can reverse this this trend. Listen, it's been great to have you with us today for the last 2 hours. I'm George Yates. Please join me next week on Justice for All from 2 to 4 in the afternoon here on WHKT 1650. And you have a great day and a great week, and hopefully you'll come back and listen to me next week. Goodbye.
CBS News, I'm Deborah Rodriguez.